Last month, we toured the herbarium at the Liberty Hyde Bailey Hortorium and Conservatory. Liberty Hyde Bailey, who was deemed the father of modern horticulture, also started a live collection of plants in greenhouses back in the early 1880s at Cornell University. These greenhouses were home to many rare and exotic plants, and later in the early 1900s, the first Liberty Hyde Bailey Conservatory was opened, which was also recently renovated. The conservatory now houses one of several plant collections that make up the Liberty Hyde Bailey Hortorium in the plant biology section of the School of Integrative Plant Sciences and is maintained by the Cornell University Agricultural Experiment Station. We synced up with Paul Cooper for a little walkthrough.
No, it was actually a frisbee hit me in the face.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I turned it and boom. Hit on that one spot of the the skin is just over the bone. So as soon as it hit me, I was like,
You're like, great.
I'm gonna look
Perfect
great
timing.
on Tuesday.
Amazing how he's able to catch the frisbee with his eye.
Yeah, I was a little like, oh no, I'm gonna be on YouTube with a black eye. My dream to be on YouTube and I got a black eye. Okay, but no, I
didn't bring my makeup.
Yeah, well that's all right. I don't look good in makeup. I look like I'm doing a musical or something. I had to go get it.
This episode is brought to you by Vivaya. Now, we've featured Vivaya before on this channel, and they offer some sleek, feminine, and flexible footwear that can easily transition from day to night. Sustainability is baked into their design DNA. First and foremost, they use a 3D knit technology to eliminate waste. And they source materials like recycled PET, latex foam, organic hemp, and rubber to make their super comfy shoes. Now I have two styles here. The Aria 5 degree, which has a 5-degree inward adjustment to create a wider toe box for a better fit, and this one I chose is made with their organic hemp weave. I just love the natural color of this flat, and it comes in so many beautiful colors and weaves. This shoe, which packs nicely and is also super lightweight, particularly good for someone with large feet, is also machine washable, so that's pretty badass. Not to mention that the new Aria 5 degree is also water repellent, so you can wear it rain or shine. The other style I have is the Melody, with a square toe and a chunky heel. It utilizes recycled plastic uppers and gives you some lift. Both have a back counter patch to prevent blisters and an arch support for superior heel cushioning. And both shoes have an Artemisia-infused herbal insole, which is naturally antimicrobial and deodorizes too. So between that and the breathable knit, you'll have no stinky feet at the end of a long day. So if you're curious to see their styles and would like to support our sponsor, head over to the site at vivayacollection.com. Just use code SUMMER15 and get an extra 15% off all Vivaya items. Well, tell me a little bit about the history of this greenhouse. What is it in relation to Cornell University, maybe even how old it is?
Yeah, I can give you fairly accurate information on that. So Cornell has had a conservatory probably for over 100 years. At one point, we had one down campus closer where Sage Hall is now. And that got moved as Cornell spread out and the ag school building sort of headed into this direction of campus. There was a conservatory where we're standing starting in 1932, and that conservatory existed all the way until about 2010. It was an old wooden structure, and it kind of got to the end of its lifespan, unfortunately, and we had to raise it, and we rebuilt in the exact footprint of that conservatory. So there's been a conservatory where we're standing now for about 90 years.
Wow.
This was finished rebuilding, I think, in 2016. May have been 2014, but it's less than 10 years old. And as if you look up and around, this is a state-of-the-art greenhouse.
Yeah, tell me about what's state-of-the-art about it.
I'm happy to.
Yeah. I'd like to see some of the features, and I think people who are maybe greenhouse nerds would like to see some of the features.
Yeah, well, let's look at, so these are our control boards. We use Argus software to control the greenhouses. And computers do a much better job of telling how light it is and how hot it is. And so we have all these wires and buttons and switches, and I can do things like, this is our roof shade curtain. It's a cloudy day today, so we don't have any shade. But some, you probably know summer that in the when it's hot and sunny, people shade their greenhouses. But then in Ithaca, when it's cloudy half the time, you've got shade on a cloudy day, and that's not ideal.
Yeah.
So we actually have it both ways. If the computer were to notice, or the weather station linked to our computer would notice that it was getting sunnier, the shade would close as it is now because I overrode it. And on a cloudy day, it would be open, and so we really get the optimal light levels, and we never have to waste light, and we never have too much light. And the other really nice thing about our shade curtain that isn't as intuitive to some people is that this closes at night. As soon as the weather outside is dark, this closes, and we have these vertical curtains that close too, and that gives us a whole layer of glazing essentially, and it saves, I believe, something like 30% of your heat energy gets saved by having that close at night. So that's a really nice thing. Unfortunately, greenhouses are kind of energy hogs. We're doing a lot of conservation and education with this, so I think we can justify that energy use. But it's really nice that we're doing it as efficiently as possible.
I think, I don't know if you still do it now, but I remember seeing on the outside on the door, like how much energy it actually uses in a given year. Kind of like cut my hopes in half of like having a greenhouse, because I was like, that's a lot of energy.
It is, but the other thing you have to remember is this one is a tropical greenhouse. We're heating this into the 70s, even in the winter.
It's not like, cold frame or for succulents even that you could get at 50 degrees.
Well, that's right, and that's actually one of my challenges in here is because it is just 2 compartments. We're trying to grow. You mentioned succulents in the winter. It's like I really want it cold for the succulents, but I really need it warm for the Titans. I need it warm for the orchids. So it's a bit of a challenge for me as the grower to sort of a one-size-fits-all for all these diverse species and that are evolved to live in really different climates. So that's one of the things that makes my job challenging, but we sort of try to maybe a little too cool for the Titans, but warmer than something else needs, and I'm still learning, what really likes it hot and what doesn't.
This is a very diverse greenhouse. I even see a pineapple right there. I started getting a little hungry.
Yeah. Well, so
you should highlight some of the cool specimen plants that you really like right now.
Yeah. Well, and diversity is a key word here. We want a collection that has a lot of plant families, that has a lot of species, and that has a lot of plant forms. And what I mean by that is sort of evolutionary forms, whether it's xerophytic, something like a succulent, or epiphytic, like some of the orchids are. And we have about 100 plant families in here and around 600 species. And having that level of diversity is really good for our taxonomy and systematics classes, people who are studying how all the different families of plants are related. So talking about diversity, if you follow me along here, starting here, we have some more, I don't want to say primitive, but plants that are, these are terrestrial plants, but they are not vascular. These are bryophytes. We have moss, so I'm sure most people here are familiar with moss, and that has a really nice feeling. You're welcome to touch that.
I feel like that could be a nice carpet.
Yeah. And the liverworts are
these are really full on.
Yeah, they're well fed here. They're really happy. And then we have things that are starting to get more into vascular plants, but spore bearing. We have Xylotum nudum, and these are the spore bearing structures on the xylotum. We have Equisetum, which is a funny thing to grow in a greenhouse.
It's so common here.
Yeah, it's a kind of a weedy species.
Yeah.
But it's really nice to have in the winter. This is such a great thing to have living plants in the winter for our teaching. Some spike mosses are Selaginellas. These are sort of fern-like. And then these things that look like 4-leaf clovers, this is Marsilia. And that's actually a fern.
Really?
It has really different spores than most ferns. They're called a sporocarp, which is almost like a little nut, and they're below the soil.
Is that the little fiddlehead coming out?
Yeah, that's the little fiddlehead to the Marsilia.
And it looks exactly like a fern fiddlehead.
Yeah, exactly. And so you see some of that form there. And this is something that actually grows on aquatic marginal plants. These can sort of float right over the water and grow pretty well. I found for me, this
is not native though, right?
No, I think that's native to Australia.
Okay.
Yeah, and I believe they're poisonous. unlike clover, which would be a good forage crop, I don't think you'd want to feed your livestock.
Now, is this different?
It's a different species, but in the same, that's a good question, in the same genus, And this one, I think, even looks more like a clover.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, I thought maybe you put them side by side just to be like, look, clover.
Yeah, that would be kind of a cool thing to look like, showing that convergence. Oh, there's it's grown over the little tag here, but yeah, Australia and New Caledonia is where they have.
Oh yeah, and it says water clover.
Yeah,
okay,
so that's the common name. So as we move along here, we have another fern, and this one's a good one for teaching because it's always got these microspores and sporangia.
It really reminds me of those little, do you remember those little candies on paper?
The dots. Yes. Again, I probably wouldn't eat anything from here, but even stuff that looks like it should be edible, you never know. On rare occasion, we use some light pesticides in here, so don't ever eat anything in here. Even the pineapple, I wouldn't advise eating. And we can go back to that because I'll show you some of the more, ethnobotanically interesting species. But this evolutionary sequence we're going along here. Now we get into cycads. These are gymnosperms. They are seed plants, but they're not true flowering plants. And these are the reproductive cones. These are most closely related, if you're from the Northeast or a lot of the continental United States, you're familiar with pine trees, and you see that resemblance to a pine cone there. So they are gymnosperms, but the cycads are much older. There's an ancient fossil record for cycads. Very cool plants. They're also quite poisonous, and a lot of them are well protected. They have these sort of prickly petioles. So even if something did eat it, it would probably not feel very good afterwards. So a couple more species of cycads. And then we're already at probably what I think is the most remarkable plant in our collection. The titanarums, which are both dormant right now, are really popular. Everybody likes titans, and I do too. But these WellWitchia, are you familiar with WellWitchia?
I am familiar with WellWitchia from Namibia, and they usually have 2 leaves for their whole life.
That's absolutely right,
And I think the last time I was here, I only thought I saw 1 WellWitchia.
You can see we have a really mature one. This is probably about 35 years old. Sounds pretty old, but for a WellWitchia, that's really young. They can live to be thousands of years in their native habitat. And you're right, I think you said they're from Namibia, which is correct. They're from a climate, I think it stretches into Angola too. It's called the Namib Fog Desert, and there's very little rainfall, but for a time of the year, a persistent fog that rolls in.
I think off the coastal fog that comes in, and they just...
Exactly, and so what these WellWitchia do, if you can imagine, I've got them in these deep pots because they like to grow a taproot, but if you were imagining that the desert floor is right here, and these big leaves with these strap-like, it looks like somebody...
Like a sea creature.
Yeah, or like somebody left an old horse bridle just rot in the desert. And then they have these grooves on their leaves. And so the fog coalesces and beads down to the base of the plant, and it drips down there. And that's how the plant has evolved so wonderfully in that habitat, so that it can capture all the rainfall. And something you said that's really interesting is when these germinate, they have a little cotyledon, and then this first set of true leaves comes up. And then it terminates at the top, and you can even see there that sort of just non-growing tissue. And
almost like the inside of a cactus in a way, where it gets really woody.
It does look like that. So the meristem is along the margin here. I think you would call that an intercalary or basal meristem, which is, I don't know of other woody plants that have that. That's more like the way a grass meristem would be. But if somebody came and just cut this whole leaf off right along the margin here,
it would propagate it?
No, it really? Actually,
even though it's a meristem?
It wouldn't come back. I mean, if you cut it into the edge, I don't know what I would call this part here, but here's the margin of the leaf, and here's sort of the periphery of the crown. And if you cut it right into there, that leaf would not come back. It only grows 2 leaves there. I don't believe you can. I think the only way to propagate WellWitchia is through seeds. I planted these 1, 2, 3 myself, and that's how I can tell you that these are only about 9 years old. And then this one's, as I said, 35 years old. And even though it's pretty young as far as that species can live, it is reproductively mature. You can see these little scars here are for when it put out its cone structure. And again, it's a gymnosperm, so you wouldn't call it a flower. But they are dioecious. You have separate male and female plants. So hopefully someday I'll get them to have their reproductive structures at the same time, and then I can give away WellWitchia seeds, which are something you can get, and they do take a long time to grow. But I honestly, if you have a sunny window, I'd love you to try WellWitchia, because it is just I really think they're one of the coolest plants out there.
I think I'm up there with you. Now, tell me, like, this is a taproot. Would you then, if this sort of starts getting and growing out underneath here, would you just put this into a larger pot below and just have this, like, kind of like Russian doll kind of thing?
I think I'll cross that bridge when I get to it, Summer. When I repotted this one, it was in a setup like these, these are all drainage tiles. This is what they used to use before they came up with the plastic kind.
Yeah.
And what I realized is, like, the smaller ones here and the bigger ones here, so you're really pulling it apart was traumatic for the plant. And this one didn't have a lot of the old brown senescent leaves to it yet, like this older one does. But when I repotted it, the thing turned brown and it went all the way to the base, and I thought I'd killed it.
Oh, no.
And that was about 1.5 years ago, so that I can tell you this is how much it's grown in 1.5 years from here to here.
Gosh, it's like your hair in a way.
Yeah.
It kind of grows from the root.
Yeah, and then it gets old and split at the ends.
Yeah.
Like exactly. Yeah. So anyway, I can't say enough about the WellWitchia. If you look at the photos of these in the wild, they can be 4 meters across, and it looks like they've got many leaves because of their tendency to sort of split and ribbon like this. But again, there's only ever 2 leaves. Now I did see something crawling across one of these. I saw a little biocontrol we use crawl across this leaf a second ago. I almost stopped to show you. Oh, here it is. So this is kind of changing subject here.
So this is the larvae of a mealybug destroyer,
Cryptolemus. Yeah, very good. You know your biocontrols. So what we like to say about this one is it's a wolf in sheep's clothing.
It is.
Because the larva looks so much like a mealybug. And I don't know if I don't know how well mealybugs see or smell, and perhaps that's enough to fool them. But this is the larval stage, and that's the stage you really want to see coming because it means they're reproducing. I get adult beetles.
I was going to say, because I can only find adult beetles here, and it's annoying because they sometimes will go to the windows.
Oh, they go straight for the light.
Yeah.
We release beetles in here every week. But when you see the larvae that they're reproducing, that's like a grower gets really excited when you start to see these, and it's like, that's not a mealybug, that's a good guy. But that will look like a lady beetle, basically, when it's mature. But
a black one.
Yeah, a tiny bit of red, but mostly black.
Like a ninja.
Yeah.
A ninja ladybug.
Yeah, and these guys, it's the larvae that do all the eating. So that's what you really need to have happen to have success.
I have seen the adults eat mealybugs, but I would always have to corral them and point them directly to the mealybug before they got distracted by the light.
Well, and one of the sort of ironic things about using Cryptolemus successfully is you actually have to have a bit of a mealybug population for them to succeed, because they lay their eggs in the egg masses, the cottony egg masses of the mealybugs. So those, if you only have a few mealybugs, you're probably not going to get reproduction. And then what you see is kind of cool. You just kind of get what I'd call greenhouse ecology, and you start to see the predator-prey cycles. You'll come in and just, oh my God, I have so many mealybugs. And then a couple weeks later, you'll see all these great larvae and beetle flying around. It's like, nice. And then they'll eat everything they've got, and then your predators will die back down. And hopefully not so much that they won't catch up with the mealybugs again. So it goes back and forth. Sometimes a years I'm like, oh, there's too many mealybugs. But the Cryptolemus do a good job. And the mealybugs are by far the worst pest I deal with. I do have to use other biocontrols for other species. We get aphids occasionally, spider mites. But in a tropical collection, and I think a lot of the stuff you grow, mealies are probably the worst thing. Maybe scale is another really bad one.
Yeah, scale is hard. The hard scale is hard to deal with because that doesn't even work on hard scale.
No.
And it's almost like a physical thing, and there are systemic stuff that you could use, but then if you're using biocontrol, you're kind of like,
Yeah.
But I think the mealybugs could get really out of control. I faced especially now because I'm not doing any kind of proactive measures in my space in Brooklyn, and I usually would release, something like a crypt, or I like lacewings.
Lacewings work well. And the nice thing about lacewings is they'll go after other species.
generalists,
You know,
yeah.
unfortunately, they also have some cannibalistic tendencies
Yes.
too.
I get the ones in like the separate rooms when I get them.
Oh yeah, the little box.
yeah, so
yeah.
they don't eat each other.
Yeah, those are great. And,
grid.
And yeah, I mean, that's the nice thing is biocontrol in greenhouses has come a long way in the last 20 years. And there's some pretty reliable places to get your biocontrols from. They're not cheap, but another reason we really like to use them in here is this is a public collection and people touch the plants. And I do occasionally use, you know, things like mild horticultural oils. Once in a while I use a growth regulator. But I don't really want there to be, I don't want nasty chemicals in here. I'd rather have a few insects than
you have
those
to work here,
chemicals.
too.
Yeah, and I work here. This
Yeah.
is exactly where I spend my time. And,
Yeah.
and you know, for many other reasons that, you know, goes into the environment. Even in a greenhouse, you know, some of it's going to run out. And so I'm pleased that I'm having success with the Cryptolemus. There were some times there where I really didn't think they were going to work for me.
Do the mealybugs really attack the WellWitchia though? It's such a thick leaf.
You know, it's surprising, but if we look on the underside here.
Oh yeah.
Here you go. Here.
Yeah. Okay.
So they do. They don't. The interesting thing is they don't seem to be. You know, they can really distort like they love cycads. Mealybugs really do well on cycads because of all the little cracks and fissures, and they can really mess up the new growth. This guy here has some distortion, and you can see the old eggs and stuff like that. So for cycads, it can be a problem, and that's, you know, once in a while when it gets so bad, that is when I'll use a growth regulator. You know, a particular growth regulator that works well against mealies. And knock on wood, I still haven't had a lot of scale problems in here, and gosh, I hope it stays that way. Because scale is the next, you know, another generalist loves tropical plants. So,
You have to also be careful, I guess, with what you bring in here.
Absolutely, and you know, and that's the other thing is you've got people from the public coming in, so you don't necessarily know where they've been, and we have wide open vents, so you know, I think we get aphids and stuff like that from just flying in from the outside.
Right.
But, so our evolutionary sequence continues a little. This is a Sequoia. It would be happier outside.
Oh, absolutely.
It doesn't look super great in here, but it, you know, we do like to have the taxonomy course. We'll use this.
Yeah.
And so that's the last in that line. And then we go over to our Amberilla, which I don't know if you may not know about Amberilla. You might, because you know a lot of plants summer. But this is considered sort of, this is really the extent lineage of sort of the oldest angiosperm there is. It used to be thought that magnoliids were the oldest, and I think recent analysis points towards Amberilla.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of like a little ilex flowers.
Yeah, they're small flowers, and these are another one from New Caledonia. This is a very hard species to get. I know this because my original one died, and thankfully Atlanta Botanical Garden gave us some. They have a really good collection of primitive plants.
I mean, it looks like you really covered your bases with it.
I propagated a few of them. I like to have a little, you know, for some stuff that's hard to replace, I always have a few extras. And I've been trying to grow these from seed without a lot of luck. But Amberilla, you can vegetatively propagate. It's difficult. You get about a 10% success rate. But these are about to go into a flowering stage, so it's not the best time to take cuttings. What I find more pleasing to the eye, but is also a rather old plant family, is Nymphaceae. We'll look at the Victoria lily later on, I hope, which is a really giant version of Nymphaceae. But here I have Nymphaea minuta. It is rather small.
So cute.
It's got these beautiful flowers. And then I have its sister species here, which isn't flowering right now, but this is Nymphaea thermarum, which is a pretty famous plant in some ways. There's a great backstory to this plant. These are from Rwanda. They're from, there was a tiny area of habitat next to a hot spring. And these, there were some botanists there who saw that the local population was diverting the spring for agriculture, and it meant that their habitat was about to be wiped out pretty quickly.
I think I remember this story.
Yeah, they had something like less than 20 viable seeds left before, and I can't remember his name, but he was the horticulturalist at Kew Botanical Gardens in England, one of the...
Oh, he wrote a book on it, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Okay.
I think his name was Carlos...
Plant Messiah.
Yeah, I can't remember his last name.
Carlos Magdalena or something like that.
Yeah, so sorry, Carlos. Thank you for saving...
The Plant Messiah book, if you want to read that story. That's how I remember it.
And I was really excited to get some of these. These are really rare. You know, they are extinct in the wild. And they're not impossible to grow, but what this horticulturalist at Kew figured out was exactly how to grow them. And they are a really nice teaching item because they're small and they flower readily. So, you know, when you're teaching, again, when you're teaching taxonomy and systematics, it's really nice to have flowers. You know, that's a major identifier of you know, where a plant fits in. Is you know, what is the flower structure? So it's a really good teaching one, and they're really cute. And you know, unfortunately they're only living now in captivity.
In plastic containers.
In plastic tubs, yeah.
I mean, how often do you have to change the water of these?
I change it about every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. And I have some snails in here that do a little bit to control the algae, not as much as I would like. But yeah, every 2 weeks or so I dump the water out and put new water in.
And we have our own native nymphaeas here too in this area as well, right?
I believe we do.
Yeah.
I just don't know which species.
Yeah.
I think every time I learn a tropical plant, I forget one of the natives for the Northeast. And so I know it's like, oh, well, I know these are from Africa, but this is from Madagascar, I believe. And as I said earlier, these are from Rwanda.
Yeah.
So I've seen you talking about Nepenthes before.
Yes.
So these are there's two kinds of pitcher plants. There's Nepenthes, and these are from Asia. And then we have a kind that's not that closely related that occur around here, the Sarracenia pitcher plants. And so they're not in the same family, but they have these pitchers that just stand back a little. So it's called pitcher as in a pitcher of water. So that, of course, lures an insect and it digests the insect in these pitchers. And I think it's cool that, again, some convergent evolution, we've seen plants sort of adopt this strategy, even though they're not closely related.
Exactly.
I said I'd talk about the pineapple, so I'll do that quick, but there's one thing above us I want to show you, too.
Look at that,
Yeah. So for people, for anybody that grew up in the Northeast, you might not, I like to get people to raise their hand and say, hey, has anybody ever seen a pineapple tree? And somebody raises their hand and it's like, okay, well, I thought they grew on trees too at one point, but they don't.
I felt the same way about cashews. Like it was so weird seeing a cashew growing on a tree. Like the way, I just never pictured a cashew like that. I don't know. It was just like a very strange thing that when you actually finally see it in the wild, you're like, oh, that's how cashews grow. You never really thought about it. And then you see pineapples. And then I also realized like wild pineapples were like round.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, this is a plant that's been bred for quite some time.
Bred to basically put into a aluminum can.
Yeah, exactly. But so what happens is you can see here's a pineapple that's not at a reproductive stage. It just has this sort of rosette that it grows from. Pineapples are in the family Bromeliaceae. They're bromeliads. And then when it's ready, it will put off this flowering inflorescence right from the base of the rosette. And then on top of that, you'll see more pineapple leaves. And I'm sure you know summer. It's really fun if you get a chance. If you have a sunny window in your house, you can go to a grocery store and buy a pineapple. You can, when you cut up the pineapple, just cut into the top inch of flesh there. This isn't ripe, but I think you can imagine what it would look like if it was. Cut into that, let it dry for a week or two, and then you can plant it in a normal potting soil. And if you're lucky, that will root for you. That's how I propagate our pineapples. When this fruit is no longer worth displaying, I'll cut that off and I will plant the top and we'll have our next pineapple. So that's something a lot of people don't know, and it's a really fun sort of kitchen horticulture project if you try to do that. I
also think that the fact that when you start to get to know your plants, and when you say, oh, this is in the bromeliad family, people then they put two and two together and they're like, oh yeah, of course, that does look like typical bromeliad.
Yeah, here's another bromeliad, and you can see that rosette structure. And again, yes, this will put off an inflorescence right from the middle of that. And actually, bromeliad has a really great diversity of forms. This is Spanish moss. This does not grow around here, but I know it does grow in a lot of the United States. And this is in the same family, Bromeliaceae. It's slightly different in the sense that these are more what you would call tank epiphytes. They trap water in these tanks. The Spanish moss, Tillandsia, relies more on these things called peltate scales, and they basically just collect water on these microscopic scales along the plants. You can't really see it very well, but this is an epiphyte. This is fine just growing on the edge of our bench here, and these grow on power lines and trees where the climate's suitable.
And some people also know the Tillandsias that do have a bit more of this kind of structure.
Yeah, that's
too.
right. There's a lot of those hybridized. Those are actually a pretty popular group of plants.
Yeah.
The bromeliads are just a nice example of a diverse family of some really diverse form. So I told you I wanted to show you a flower here. Before I forget, let me get my pole pruners.
Oh, look at these little passifloras too.
Yeah, we should
so
talk
cute.
about those. They are cute.
So we have a native one of these as well, but this one's it has the more butterfly-shaped leaves.
So I'm going to cut this down.
This is exciting. This looks like an Aristolochia.
It is an Aristolochia, and their common name is the Dutchman's pipe.
This is a native then.
We do have some native species. This is
too big.
Yeah, this one's from Brazil, but you are absolutely correct. We have native.
Do you think our native swallowtail could live on something like this? I wonder.
That's a good question. I don't know. I know it's a problem. Yeah, I tore that a little bit. My pole pruner needs to be sharpened so it's not cutting its. Okay, hopefully I didn't mangle that too much.
You caught that like you caught your Frisbee.
No, not quite. I didn't catch it with my face. So this was just about to open. One of the cool things about these is I think when you saw it up there before I cut it down, it hadn't opened yet.
Yeah.
And it's actually sort of inflated with air. And to me, it looks a lot like a lung,
It does.
But this is an incredible plant.
Wow, the color.
The color.
It looks like tapestry.
Yeah, and that color has some resemblance, I'd say, to flesh.
Yeah, meat.
And that's probably
the marbling even in there.
Yeah, exactly.
The fatty marbling.
There's a reason for that, and so it's attracting insects that think they're getting a meal. This is a very similar pollination strategy as the titanarums.
Yeah, although we're pointing to nothing right now.
Yeah, right now we're
See
pointing to an empty pot that says "Do not water."
There's one that's like a
yeah, that's the senescent petiole. The cool thing about titans, that's a single leaf there, and that one is on its way. I'll pull that leaf out in a couple weeks, and it will go through its dormancy. But what is really neat about the Aristolochia too, I think, if you can look down here, it has these little directional hairs.
Oh, yeah.
This is not unlike the Nepenthes that we showed you.
Yeah.
The insects go down here, and to a little insect, those little hairs are quite big.
Yeah.
And it is an obstacle to them being able to get out of the flower. So.
And then does it go down into this?
It goes down into this little chamber. So I guess I would call this like a giant modified petal. Again,
it's like a stomach, essentially.
Yeah. Right? The botanist might be correct me when I say this is a modified petal, so forgive me, folks, if I'm wrong about that. But the actual reproductive parts of this flower are inside this little chamber, so I'm going to try to orient it here, and then, gosh, I hope I don't cut myself on camera. I've done that before, and it's always a little awkward. Okay, cut, tear. So now you can see the end, those hairs where it came out. And then down here, those are your reproductive parts of the flower. Ooh. And what
rated XXX.
Yeah, I feel like we're snooping a little here. But what's really cool about this is now, remember, an insect went in here to pollinate this plant. And then after the pollen sheds, at the same time the pollen is shedding, these hairs slough off and go away. So once the insect gets some pollen on it, the hairs aren't trapping it anymore. So the plant is captured, hopefully for the plant, captured the insect, given it some pollen, maybe took some pollen already, and then it gives it some more pollen to go visit another plant. So it lets it out, but not until the insect's going to have some pollen on it. So it's just another amazing evolutionary reproductive strategy.
It reminds me of some of the orchids, you know, sometimes where they have to put the pollinia on, or some flowers that close up and then the beetle comes out, you know, the following day.
The Victoria lilies do that.
Yeah.
They'll trap scarab beetles overnight. Orchids, unlike rotting meat, a lot of times they use pseudocopulation, right? So they're convincing an insect or something, even I think there's bat pollinated orchids, that they're going to be visiting with a mate, and in reality, they're just doing pollination work for the plant, just like in this case, but with a slightly different form of deception. So you can look at Pollinia if you want.
Yeah, do you have some here?
I do. A lot of the orchids aren't flowering right now, but we always have something. Try to keep a few species that flower a lot.
Look at I bet is this fairly sugary? You said not to eat anything.
Yes, it is. It is really sugary. And a lot of species of Passiflora will produce those on their petiole. They're called extrafloral nectaries. And that's a reward for, you know, a visitor.
I just got rewarded.
You just got rewarded. And I have grown those outside at home where I knew I could eat it, and it's very sweet. I mean, it reminds me of baklava or baklava.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, like with the honeys, like honey,
just
the Greek honey.
Thick, sticky, sugary, delicious. And here's just back here. I know we're going to talk about an orchid, but here's another species of Passiflora.
So gorgeous,
really
huh?
cute. Passiflora is cool. It has beyond the petals here, but before the stamen, it has this whole extra feature that a lot of flowers don't have, called a corona, like a crown. And those are really beautiful and striped. And we have a few species of Passiflora in here. Not the kind that you would eat, passion fruit, if you're familiar with it. That is a Passiflora.
Yeah, and like our native one, our maypop.
Yeah, incarnata.
Yeah.
Yep. So this is a hybrid. Most of what we have in this collection, we don't, when I say a species orchid, what I mean is an orchid that's really resembles what it looks like in nature. A lot of the Phalaenopsis and the stuff we see in the grocery store, which are great because they've been bred to last a long time and they're a little easier to grow, but we like to have the sort of the more natural form. With this as an exception. This is Bulbophyllum jersey. It's a hybrid between two species of Bulbophyllum. This guy has something pretty cool. It has what we call an articulated labellum, so you can touch it, and it takes very little to make it dance like that.
That's so fun.
So that probably really helps convince an insect that it's encountering something that's alive.
Yeah.
And then underneath this little thing here,
like how is it attached? Like it feels like it's on a little hinge.
Yeah, it's just almost filamentous.
You want to try it out? It's really cool. It's like one of those little birds that drop into the water.
One of those things you put on your dashboard of your car.
Yeah,
right?
Like the little hula dancer.
So right here, oh no.
You lost it.
I dropped it. I was going to show you the Pollinia, and now it's gone.
It's really in the grate somewhere.
Yeah, or maybe it'll stick itself to an insect. But yeah, orchids have these things called Pollinia, where most pollen, you see it on your car, it's dusty. But in the case of orchids, they fuse all this pollen into these little sacs called pollinia.
It's like a little yellow ball.
Yeah. And then most species, I think, have two. There may be some that have one or more than two. But most species of orchids have two little pollinia sacs. And then they have something attached to them called visidium. And that's a very sticky, tacky substance that sticks to the thorax of the insect. And then hopefully it'll go visit another one. And in that process, move the pollinia onto the female reproductive part of the orchid.
I once went to an orchid show, and if I could find the video that we had filmed, we did witness a regular housefly go in, got really stuck with the pollinia. It was very hard for him to actually get unstuck, and he went flying away, and he was like really, flying at an angle because he had the pollinia stuck to one side of his body.
Yeah.
So if I find that video,
I'd love to see that. Here's some more bromeliads.
Yeah, here's some popular ones that you would often see, some people grow indoors.
Yeah, these are pretty common. I don't really love this one. It's got these really saw-like margin to the leaf.
It can be even more than a cactus, very damaging to your pant leg or your sweater.
Or sometimes, I think people often like to rub leaves. There's just something really nice about that. You just don't do it with that one, please.
This to me looks like one that would grow in surprisingly really heavy light. Just
Yes.
because of the white,
the
waxy
waxiness.
white,
Yeah, that probably is true. And a lot of bromeliads are, I mean, they're popular landscape plants in hot, sunny climates. I know we don't really grow, I don't think there's too many bromeliads that can handle our climate, but yeah, they're nice plants. And again, they're just showing the versatility within that family is a nice thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're familiar with the mimosa,
Of course, yeah.
the sensitive plant.
A child's favorite.
I was
you know.
just going to say that, you know, I really, one of the things I love about my job is bringing grade school kids in, like fourth and, you know, anywhere from first to fourth graders, and they just go crazy. My kids are still asking me about these plants. They're native to Asia, I think. They're really naturalized. They're actually pretty invasive. So when, you know, they're all throughout South America.
Yeah, I've seen them in Costa Rica.
Yeah, and I think they're kind of a nuisance plant actually, because they have these little, I don't know if that's a spine or a thorn or a prickle, but these sharp little appendages coming off the wood here.
And when I think of leaves like this, and this may not always be true, but I think about it being in the family of Fabaceae. And
Yeah.
they're often like the first mover plants that come in really disturbed ground. They're nitrogen fixing
Yep.
to a certain degree.
Yep.
And those are often the plants that we see, even black locust here, like Robinia,
Yeah.
which some would consider like an invasive, even though it's native to Pennsylvania, the state below
Right.
us. Those are always the first movers. They might not last a long time, but they nitrify the soil, and they have that rhizobium in their roots.
Yeah, and this one has a really spreading characteristic, which
Covers ground.
covers a lot of, you know, helps
Bare earth.
helps it compete.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I think this is cool. I think we should go see the Victoria lily.
Yeah, let's see the Victoria. Next time I have you, hopefully we'll have our pond in here fixed, but we do have some great Victorias, and I want to show you those. This is what I would call an annex house. We've got some stuff in the collection that doesn't fit in our main display house. It's also a propagation house. Occasionally I replace our mother plants with smaller individuals. So I'm going to let you in here because there's a very special plant in here.
It's the overflow.
Yes, the overflow is...
This is when you realize you didn't make the greenhouse big enough.
Oh, they're never big enough. I meant to cut this off before you guys came here, but you can watch me do some pruning. This would be a good one to show you. So this is the Victoria lily. These grow in the Amazon. We were talking about the Nympha thermarum, the world's smallest water lily. And I believe that Victoria amazonica is the largest in the world. You've probably seen old black and white photos of people standing on a lily pad.
Yeah, like little kids sitting in them. Yeah.
That's you can do that, but what you have to do is put a piece of plywood down and have it out of the camera angle, or else you will just punch right through those.
But with the little babies on them, I feel like that's normal.
You could probably lay a baby on its back. I put a brick on one of these once, and it had enough buoyancy. So these have a really formidable defense from swimming herbivores, something that would come below the plant.
Oh, that makes so much, I never even thought about that.
They are sharper than they look.
Wow.
And it's very buoyant. You can see that by looking at it. But it's probably, you know, these manatees, large aquatic herbivores, coexist with these Victoria plants. So this is a really great protection. But you see on the top side of the leaves, it's just smooth. I wish it was 3 days from now, because we would have, this flower would be open.
Yeah. Send us a photo 3 days from now.
I will try, yeah. It's really cool. It opens up, it'll open up in the afternoon, and it'll be a white flower with lots of petals. And these attract scarab beetles for pollination. And there's a scent that attracts the beetles, and it goes to the flower. The flower closes overnight. Keeps the beetle trapped there until the next morning, and then it opens up again, it turns pink, and the beetle can escape with the pollen, hopefully.
And these are scarab beetles that are coming and flying in then?
Yes, I believe they're flyers.
Yeah.
I don't know much about the beetles, but you would think they'd have to be able to fly to get
as
in
opposed to
here.
maybe somebody scooting across the water or something.
Yeah, that's something I don't exactly know. But We have these in our conservatory normally. Our pond hopefully will be repaired soon. And they're just a really wild member in the Nymphaceae family. We get this one is a hybrid we get actually from Longwood Gardens. They're very generous with their seeds. Every year they give me new seeds and I can start more of them.
And you have to start them from seed then?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Certain Nymphaea, you can divide the crown. You know, they're vegetatively propagatable, but not these. So you have to grow them from seed. They can be grown for several years at a time. This one's several years old. And the one with the deeper cupping here is actually the species Nymphaea cruciana. And then this one with the flatter but wider leaves is a hybrid between this species, cruciana, and the species Nymphaea amzonica, which is the one where you see the old pictures of.
Yeah.
So I really like these plants. They're kind of a challenge to grow, and so to have them succeed and be alive makes me feel good. And repotting them is really a pain because they're full of sand, and like 10 gallons of wet sand is kind of hard to lift out. Craig has videotaped us several times moving and repotting these, and you usually get your arms a little bit shredded because you can see that the petiole on these also has these really sharp appendages. So it makes it difficult to move down to the conservatory, but it's worth it. It's really a great plant. So
I think we saw back in the Missouri Botanical Gardens, we saw a young woman in her full gear, like in the water, kind of cutting and moving these. And I think they actually display these outdoors in the Missouri Botanic Garden, which I think is a similar zone. Zone 5, Zone 6, and then they bring them in every year and they restart them from seeds.
Yeah, Longwood Gardens has an outdoor, you know, the people who they distribute a lot of seed. In their Victoria pond, it's actually heated. Because this is Philadelphia, so you know it's similar climate to here.
Yeah.
But I think they can keep them going until like November because it's in a heated pool.
Interesting.
And the nice thing is when you grow them outside with more room and more sun, the leaves get even bigger. I mean, the leaves to this species could be as big as this whole tub.
I was going to say this tub would be the leaf.
And I've got four of them crammed in here, and they're always fighting. You know, you can see the scratch marks from the adjacent leaves on them. And as long as we're in here, I'll just show you one more thing. This is our mist bench. This is a really nice thing to have. Many plants can be propagated vegetatively, and a mist bench saves you a lot of time. So what you're seeing in here is all stuff that will go down to the collection when it's mature enough.
And this is on a timer then?
Yeah, there's a little time clock right there on the wall. So every 20 minutes we get about 20 to 30 seconds of mist, if I remember correctly. It's usually when I'm sticking my head in here to look at something and then the mist goes off in my face. And then all the stuff back here are just fun. We do have a collection of arums over there. None of them are in bloom at the moment. One little thing I'll show you, just watch out. It's not terribly slippy. There's a little bit of algae here. But this guy that you can't see very well, you might know what this is, Summer. This is a cocoa.
Look at the flowers coming along the edge of the trunk.
So cocoa, you see this more in the tropics, but you do see species around here that do this. It's called a coliformis, I think. The flowers come right out of the woody stem, and you don't see that much around here. Redbud is an exception. Redbud flowers that way. But if we pollinate it, the big cocoa pods would be growing right off the main trunk of this cocoa plant. So this is just a small one, but it's big enough to be flowering. So.
Well, thank you so much for the tour and a little bit of the overflow as well.
Yeah.
It's very nice to see, because I don't think I've been in the overflow annex section.
Yeah. We I will bring people here by request, but it's not, our conservatory is open to the public. That's something that I'd love to tell everybody. We're open from 10 to 3 weekdays, with rare exception unless it's a holiday. So if the door to the conservatory that we were just in earlier is unlocked, you may enter and just enjoy the plants.
And I actually have a really fun story before we go. When I was here, I first came here when I was 13 years old, and you weren't working here at the time.
No, probably not.
There was a woman, and I remember I walked into the conservatory when I was looking at universities. Yes, I was looking at universities when I was 13 years old. And then I came here and I was like, I want that tree. And it was a musa. It was a big banana. And there was nobody in there at the time. And then maybe about 10, 15 minutes later, a woman came out and she saw that I was so interested in the conservatory and the plants growing in there. And she said, you know what, I have something for you. And she came out with a little sucker of a banana.
Oh.
And so that, for me, I think really solidified my time in coming here.
That was, yeah, I worked with her for a while. Her name was Carol, so.
Okay.
Yeah, she was great. I learned a lot from her too, actually.
Yeah.
So,
well, that was a really wonderful moment, and I think that really solidified my interest in this place. So thank you so much for the tour. That was really lovely.
Oh yeah, anytime.
And a nice trip down memory lane.
You know, touring people around and showing them the collection is my favorite part of the job. A lot of my job is labor, like everything, but you know, getting to talk about the plants is just pleasing to me. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
If you enjoyed the tour, give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing and hitting the notifications button. 1% of our Google AdSense proceeds here goes towards plant conservation initiatives. And if you're looking to deepen your knowledge on plants, consider our suite of courses online from Houseplant Basics to the Houseplant Masterclass. It can all be found on the homesteadbrooklyn.com and Houseplant Masterclass websites. And if you're interested in the topics of gardening outdoors and homesteading in the country, then you could swing by our sister channel over at Flock Finger Lakes. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next video.